My name is Adrian Blake, 45 years old, and for most of my life I believed I had an instinct for danger. Not the loud kind, though gunshots. No flashing threats. I'm talking about the quiet danger that hides under ordinary days. The kind that waits for you in conversations that sound harmless until you replay them later, realizing every word was a warning you failed to hear. For years I'd convinced myself I could read people. I work in a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago, the sort of place where every handshake contains a lie and every hallway conversation sounds like a negotiation. Yet somehow, despite all my experience, I never expected the knife to come from the person I let closest to me. The truth began unraveling on a night so ordinary, I can still smell a train on asphalt, the faint metallic tang of elevator doors, the sour aftertaste of the coffee I'd been drinking since early morning. I'd stayed late at the office, trying to finish a quarterly report that had been pushed onto my desk far too close to the deadline. I wasn't supposed to be there that long. If I hadn't stayed, maybe I never would have seen what I saw. Maybe I would have kept believing the comforting version of my life. Maybe I would have remained blind. By the time I finally left the conference room, it was almost 10 p.m. The building was nearly empty, the kind of silence that makes your own footsteps sound suspicious. My keycard beeped when I swiped into the elevator, but before I could step in, I heard a voice echo down the hallway, a woman's voice. Her voice. Lina. My wife. The hallway lights were dimmed for the night, so I couldn't see her, at first only her silhouette near one of the glass meeting rooms. She shouldn't have been there. She had no reason to be anywhere near my office building that late. She'd told me she was meeting a friend for dinner. She'd even sent me a photo earlier. Wine glasses, dim restaurant lighting, a plate of pasta she didn't even finish. But she wasn't in that restaurant anymore. She was here. I stepped back, hidden behind the elevator wall, the metal cold against my shoulder. I told myself I wasn't spying. I told myself she might have a reason. Something innocent. Something explainable. People show up in strange places sometimes, but then I heard another voice. Low male, too familiar. Grant. My direct manager. A man who smiled like he was always calculating the cost of showing his teeth. A man who once told me, half jokingly, I can make or break your career. Adrian? I'd laughed it off at the time. The way you laugh when you know something is true but hope it never becomes relevant. Now his voice was close to Lena's, too close. I couldn't hear every word they were speaking softly. That kind of softness no one uses unless they're sharing something meant to be hidden, but the tones alone were enough. A gentle murmur from him. A quiet, breathy answer from her. A pause, footsteps shifting. Something brushing against glass. I forced myself to move. A few steps, silent, toward the meeting room. It wasn't fully lit, just the warm glow from the city outside, and a faint desk lamp inside. I could see their shapes more clearly now. Grant stood facing her, one hand braced on the table behind Lena, leaning in slightly, like he'd been whispering something directly into her ear. Lena wasn't pulling away. Her arms were crossed, but not defensively, more like she was trying to hold herself steady. I can't keep doing this, she whispered, a sentence sharp enough to split my ribs. Grant didn't answer. He just leaned a little closer. My breath caught, and something instinctual made me step back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear the rest, to see more, to let the truth crawl fully out of the shadows. But I also couldn't move. I stood there as if anchored to the floor. Finally, Lena's voice cut through the silence again. Shakier this time. He's starting to suspect something. My fingertips went cold. She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. I felt it. I felt it in every syllable. She meant me. Grant murmured something I couldn't make out. She shook her head. He stepped closer. Her eyes dropped to the floor. His hand touched her arm. That was the moment when something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a hairline fracture forming in a glass bottle. Small, invisible at first, but spreading fast beneath the surface. I'd backed away before either of them saw me. I didn't run. I walked slowly, deliberately, like my body had decided to save face even though my mind was unraveling. The elevator doors closed quietly behind me, and I stared at my reflection in the mirrored metal, barely recognizing the man looking back. Was she lying to me? Was she involved with him? How long had this been happening? How many late dinners had been excuses? How many conversations had been softened or shortened to hide something deeper? Every question felt like a fresh one. By the time I reached the lobby, the night security guard nodded at me with the same bored expression he always had. I must have looked normal enough to him. Just another man leaving work too late. Just another worker bee in a building full of them. Inside, though, everything was shifting. Inside, I knew something had begun, something irreversible. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember walking through the door. I only remember sitting on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet of my apartment like it was a stranger's home. Lena came back an hour later. She smelled like rain and perfume I didn't recognize. She smiled softly when she saw me awake. "You're still up?" I studied her face, trying to decide whether I wanted the truth or the illusion. I couldn't sleep. I answered. She kissed my cheek, light, casual, a gesture so ordinary it felt like mockery. "I'll shower and get to bed," she said, already walking toward the bathroom. I watched the door close behind her. I didn't say a word, but something had changed. Something had shifted, and in that shift, a quiet promise formed, one I didn't fully understand yet, but could already feel tightening inside me. I was going to find out the truth, no matter what it cost. The next morning felt unreal, like waking inside a dream that hadn't finished forming. The sunlight through the blinds cut across the room in thin, sterile stripes, and for a few seconds I let myself pretend nothing had happened, that the previous night was just another late shift, another empty apartment, another harmless lie between spouses who'd grown too tired to fight. But the mind is cruel. It doesn't let you forget the things you weren't meant to see. Lena was already up when I came into the kitchen. She had her hair tied back, a mug of tea steaming in front of her, scrolling through her phone with a calmness that felt almost rehearsed. She looked up and smiled like everything was normal. And maybe that was the frightening part, how normal she could look after standing with another man in a dimly lit office, whispering about secrets and regret. "Morning," she said. "Morning." The words scraped out of me. "Oh." She tilted her head. "You okay? You look tired." "I stayed up too late working." I lied. A lie for a lie. Balanced. She stood and kissed my cheek again. The same soft, automatic gesture as the night before. I didn't flinch, but something inside me recoiled. If she noticed anything, she didn't show it. "I have a meeting downtown," she said. "I'll be back late." "Don't wait up." "Late again." She grabbed her bag, slipped into her jacket, and left the apartment with a breezy confidence that felt like a slap. As the door clicked shut, silence filled the space she'd left behind, heavy, accusing, familiar. I sat at the table, staring at her empty mug, replaying every detail of the night before. The lowered voices, the way Grant leaned toward her, the fear in her whisper. "He's starting to suspect something. Something. What something? Was it an affair? Or something else? Something worse?" I thought I knew which answer would hurt more. Then I realized they both hurt in different ways. Half an hour passed before I forced myself to get dressed for work. I moved slowly, like someone learning how to inhabit their own body again. My hands were steady enough, but inside my chest, everything felt loose and trembling. When I got to the office, the atmosphere felt different, sharper. People whispered in corners, eyes flicking toward me and then away. It was subtle, but I'd spent 20 years reading micro-expressions in meetings, tracking invisible tensions in boardrooms. I knew when I was being watched. I went straight to my office. My desk was exactly how I'd left it, organized, color-coded, predictable. The only predictable thing left in my life. I dropped my bag, booted up my computer, and barely had time to breathe before a soft knock sounded behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Morning, Adrian, Grant said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. He always did that, a power move disguised as casual friendliness. Today, though, I saw it differently. Today, every one of his habits felt like evidence. Morning, I replied, forcing my voice to stay even. He grinned, too wide, too comfortable. I wanted to touch base about the Harper account. We need the final projections by Friday. Of course, he opened with business. That was how men like him operated. Hide the blade behind a spreadsheet. I'll have them ready, I said. His eyes lingered on me, studying me, measuring something I couldn't name. You look tired, he said. I swallowed. Long night? He nodded slowly, like he already knew. Maybe he did. He walked around the room, pretending to admire the framed certificates on the wall, pretending this was normal. Pretending I hadn't seen him with my wife in a dark conference room whispering secrets. You know, he said casually, you've always been one of the most reliable people here. Solid. Trustworthy. Double quotes trustworthy. The word tasted like poison, and I'd hate for anything to jeopardize that. He paused just behind me. Too close. Especially now when things are shifting. Double quotes shifting. A harmless word. Unless it comes from someone who knows what you don't. What's shifting? I asked, letting the question sit heavy in the air. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just office politics. You know how he is. He patted my shoulder. Another micro-power move and left the room as casually as he'd entered. The moment the door closed, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I opened my computer. I didn't check my emails. I didn't start the projections. Instead, I pulled up the internal database, searching for something I should have checked years ago but never had a reason to. Access logs, specifically. Late-night activity. My hands trembled slightly as I typed in my credentials, navigated the encrypted sections, and filtered the logs by date and time. The results loaded slowly, each second stretching like a thread about to snap. There it was. 2 entries, both unauthorized, both marked with a red flag indicating admin override. 11:46 p.m. to Blake. Adrian ID spoofed. 11:49 p.m. Sensitive files accessed. Harper projections. Internal audits. It wasn't me. I hadn't been anywhere near the building at that time. Someone had entered the system using my credentials. Someone had accessed files that could get me fired or worse. And the timestamp matched the exact night I'd seen Lena and Grant in the office. The truth hit me like a slow, crushing weight. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup, a coordinated one. I leaned back in my chair, the room spinning for a moment, as the wall seemed to close in. Everything suddenly made sense. The tension in Lena's voice, the way Grant watched me, the subtle whispers in the office, the sudden influx of concerns about my performance. Someone was building something around me, a trap, a narrative, a collapse planned from the inside. And I was already halfway inside it. But the part that shook me the most wasn't the setup. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the sudden realization that I didn't know who was doing this to me. More Grant or Lena. The elevator dinged outside my office, pulling me back into the present. I checked the time. 10:18 a.m. Still early. Still enough hours in the day to find answers. Because now I needed them more than ever. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It wasn't about suspicion. It wasn't about jealousy. This was survival. I left the office building around noon, though I don't remember making the decision to walk out. One moment I was staring at the falsified access logs with my name stamped across them like a confession I never wrote, and the next thing I knew, I was outside, standing in the raw Chicago wind, my breath fogging in front of me. The city sounded different, sharper, colder, like every distant siren and honking car held a warning I hadn't learned to interpret yet. I walked without direction, letting the streets pull me wherever they wanted. I needed noise, movement, anything to drown out the thoughts clawing at the inside of my skull. Thoughts of Lena, thoughts of Grant, thoughts of how the pieces had been falling into place around me without my noticing. When I finally stopped, I was standing across from a narrow cafe with steamed-up windows. I went inside out of habit more than hunger. The soft hum of conversation, the clinking cups, the hiss of espresso machines, it all felt surreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a table in the corner, my back to the wall. Old instinct? I couldn't shake the feeling someone might walk in behind me. For a while, I just stared at the surface of the coffee, watching the reflections ripple every time my hand trembled. And it hit me. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating spouse. I wasn't just dealing with a manipulative boss. Someone was rewriting my story from the outside, replacing facts with suspicions, replacing truth with carefully placed lies. And the worst part, they were doing it with a level of precision that suggested planning, forethought, intent. But why? What did I have that someone wanted badly enough to dismantle my life piece by piece? My mind flicked back to the Harper account. A multi-million-dollar client with enough political and corporate overlap to make anyone nervous. A single mistake on that project could ruin a career. A single leak could spark an internal investigation. And someone had accessed those files under my name. Someone was trying to bury something and make sure I took the fall. My pulse hammered through my neck. I opened my laptop, ignoring the slow churn in my stomach, and connected to my hotspot. I typed into the internal database, searching for corresponding logs, anything that could tie Grant to the breach. Nothing. Either he'd covered his tracks flawlessly, or someone else had done it for him. I was staring at the screen when a shadow fell across my table. Adrian, I looked up sharply. Standing there was someone I hadn't expected to see, Nina Clark, one of the junior analysts from my department. Quiet, observant, smart. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, which made her presence here more alarming than comforting. Nina, I said carefully, did you need something? She hesitated before sitting down across from me, glancing around the cafe like she was checking for threats. I went by your office, she said. You weren't there. I needed fresh air. That's not a great idea today. My stomach tightened. Why? She lowered her voice until it barely carried across the table. They're talking about terminating you. The words hit harder than they should have. I'd suspected something was coming. Grant's behavior alone had been enough to warn me, but hearing it out loud brought a coldness that settled deep in my bones. On what grounds? I asked. She swallowed. Unauthorized access, data breach, mishandling sensitive information. All things I hadn't done, all things someone had framed me for. I leaned forward. How do you know this? Because I overheard Grant and Harper's internal counsel discussing it this morning. They're calling it due diligence before the formal action. Of course Grant was involved. He had been pulling strings silently, making sure every suspicion landed on me while he stayed clean. But why would Harper's counsel be involved so quickly, unless the breach wasn't just a security issue, unless something in those files put someone at risk, unless they needed a scapegoat before anyone started digging deeper. My voice was low. Did they say anything else? Nina hesitated again, glancing toward the windows. They said they already have proof. My jaw clenched. Fabricated proof. I know, she said quietly. Anyone who actually works with you knows. But the board doesn't. They only see data, logs, timestamps, my name, my ID. A perfect narrative. Someone had built a case so clean it almost looked real. I sat back, staring through the window as a delivery truck rumbled by. Every worst-case scenario unfolded in my head: the accusations, the interrogation, the empty apartment after Lena left for good, the slow erosion of everything I'd spent my life building. But underneath the fear, a different feeling began to take shape. Anger. A cold, quiet anger, sharp enough to cut through the fog. Nina spoke again. Adrian, you need to be careful. Careful of what? I asked. She met my eyes with a seriousness I'd never seen from her. Careful of who you trust. That landed harder than anything else she'd said. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. I have to go. Please, don't go back to the office yet. Then she stood up and left as quickly as she'd arrived, leaving me alone with my coffee and a storm unraveling inside my chest. I sat there for several minutes, letting her words settle. Don't go back to the office yet. Why not? What was happening there that I wasn't supposed to see? I checked the time. 12:37 p.m. Too early for formal HR action. Too early for a board meeting. Too early for anything official. Unless they weren't planning something official. Unless they were preparing something else. Something they didn't want me around for. The cafe suddenly felt too small. Too warm, too bright. I gathered my things and stepped outside into the biting wind. The city felt different now, too loud, too fast, too sharp. Every car that passed made me flinch. Every stranger's glance made my pulse spike. Paranoia had a way of feeling like instinct when you'd already seen how deep the knives went. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Lena's name. Part of me wanted to confront her. Part of me wanted to demand the truth. Part of me wanted to hear her say something, anything that would make sense of the chaos. But I didn't call. Instead, I opened something else. The building's live security feed. I still had access. For now. It loaded slowly, each camera flickering to life like opening doors in a long, dark hallway. Hallway for B. Empty. Lobby. Crowded. Conference room 12. Occupied. My breath itched when I saw who was inside. Grant, 2 HR representatives, and Lena. My wife, sitting at the table, talking to them. Talking to them about me. My heart stopped. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her expression calm, controlled, like she belonged there, like she knew exactly what this meeting was, like she had been part of it all along. I zoomed in slightly. Her lips moved. Grant nodded. One of the HR reps took notes. Then something happened that froze my blood. Lena reached into her bag and placed a flash drive on the table, a flash drive I recognized. Silver. Thin, a small dent at the corner from when I dropped it last year. My flash drive. The one that went missing 2 weeks ago. Her voice, though muted on the feed, seemed to echo in my mind. He's starting to suspect something. The truth wasn't a knife. It was a slow, crushing weight. And it was finally landing. As I stared at the screen, watching my wife hand over evidence that would destroy me, I realized something with a clarity that felt like ice watered down my spine. I wasn't being framed by a coworker. I wasn't being betrayed by a spouse. I was being hunted. And the people hunting me were already one step ahead. I don't remember leaving the sidewalk or crossing the street. My body just moved while my mind stayed frozen on the image of Lena sliding that flash drive across the conference table like it was nothing more than a forgotten receipt. Cold, calm, cooperative. There was no fear in her face, no hesitation, no conflict, only certainty. She knew exactly what she was doing. By the time I came back to myself, I was standing in a small riverside park 2 blocks away, hands numb from the wind. Thoughts spiraling so fast they barely made sense. The betrayal itself was one thing, but the precision of it, that was something else entirely. Lena wasn't improvising. She was executing something planned. And that terrified me more than anything. I sank onto a bench, ignoring the group of joggers passing by, and forced myself to breathe. I needed to think, to dissect this like a problem I could still solve. Because if I let emotion drive me now, I'd fall exactly where they wanted me to fall. The flash drive. That was the key. It wasn't just a personal item she stole from my desk. It was the one piece of hardware that contained raw data for the Harper account audit, secure files I'd personally encrypted. Files that could be used to, what? Fabricate my involvement. Planted access records. Insert timestamps. Someone had needed that drive, and Lena had delivered it, which meant she hadn't been pulled into this by accident. She was part of it. My phone buzzed suddenly, snapping me back. An unknown number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but instinct told me not to. I answered. A woman's voice, sharp and clipped, came through the line. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes," I said slowly. "This is Cynthia Brooks from HR. We require you to come into the office for an immediate compliance review." Compliance review. A polite execution. I forced my voice steady. "Is this regarding the Harper project?" A pause. "We'll discuss everything when you arrive." I almost laughed. "I'm sure you will, Mr. Hale," she said, tone stiffening. "Failure to appear will be considered non-cooperation." I ended the call. They were panicking. They wanted me contained, controlled, inside the building where they ran the narrative. I stared at the phone until my reflection blurred in the black screen. That meeting wasn't about figuring out the truth. It was about cornering me before I learned something I wasn't supposed to know. Someone inside the company had triggered an internal legal response faster than protocol allowed. That meant desperation. Or fear. But fear of what? Of who? I stood, pulled my coat tighter, and walked toward the river's edge. I needed answers. I needed to know how deep this went. And there was only one person who might know even a fraction of it. Nina. I found her number in an old teen group chat and called her. She answered after 3 rings. "Adrian, where are you?" I asked. There was a pause long enough to make my stomach drop. I can't talk right now. You approached me," I said. "You warned me. Don't disappear on me now." The line crackled softly. "You shouldn't have looked at the feed." My blood went cold. "How do you know I did?" "Because they know," she whispered. "They saw the login." I looked around the empty park, my pulse spiking. The idea that they could trace my access that fast meant someone was monitoring my credentials in real time. "Nina," I said, lowering my voice, "what is happening?" Another pause. Then, very quietly, "This isn't just a data breach. Harper isn't just a client. They're tied to a federal contract, and the files you handled weren't supposed to be touched by anyone outside a designated circle. I'm part of that circle," I said sharply. "Not anymore." The words hit like a punch. "They're building a chain of custody narrative," she continued. "Something went wrong on the Harper project months ago. Something illegal. And someone high up used your access as the cleanup path. A cleanup path. A scapegoat." My breathing slowed into something heavy and mechanical, like my body was preparing for impact. "Who?" I asked. "Grant." A longer silence this time. "Grant's involved, but he's not the one pulling the strings." "Then who is?" "You already know," she whispered. I closed my eyes. "Lena. My wife. The one person with enough access to my life, personal, digital, emotional, to sabotage me without tripping a single alarm." "But why? Why would she destroy me like this?" Before I could ask, Nina's voice tightened. "Adrian, whatever you do, don't go home." The line cut out, just like that. I stared at the phone, heart pounding, every instinct screaming the same thing: don't go home, which meant someone was waiting for me there. Or something was already set in motion that I wasn't meant to interrupt. My apartment wasn't safe. The office wasn't safe. Where the hell was I supposed to go? A gust of wind swept across the river, cold enough to sting. I started walking again, my steps fast and uneven. I needed distance. I needed anonymity. I needed time to think without a pair of eyes on every corner. I turned onto Wabash, then onto a narrower street lined with old brick buildings. The traffic noise softened behind me. My mind raced ahead of me, piecing together fragments of a puzzle I didn't know I was part of. Lena had access to my life. Grant had access to my professional footprint. Together, they could merge those 2 worlds into a perfect storm. But what if it wasn't just the 2 of them? What if Lena hadn't been manipulated? What if she wasn't a pawn, but a partner? The thought made me stop mid-step. What did I actually know about her work, her department, her late nights? How many times had I taken her word for things simply because she'd said them with that composed, unshakable calm? The ground under my feet suddenly felt unsteady. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. Stop digging. You don't know what you're stepping into. I stared at the message, my pulse hammering in my ears. Another text arrived immediately. Come to the office, now, while you still can. Not a threat. A command. My skin crawled. A third message followed. We can fix this if you cooperate. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but anger. A deep, boiling anger that had been building since the moment Lena touched that flash drive. They wanted my compliance, my silence, my willingness to fall on the sword they'd forged for me. I closed the messages and kept walking. If they wanted to stop me, they'd have to come find me. I wasn't going to hand myself over like some obedient, broken man, not anymore. But as I turned the next corner, someone stepped out from behind a parked SUV. Too close, too fast. A hand grabbed my arm. I spun instinctively, adrenaline surging, ready to fight or run. And then I froze, because the face I saw wasn't a stranger's. It was someone I recognized. Someone who should have been hundreds of miles away. Someone who stared at me with urgency and fear. Adrian, he said, voice low, breath visible in the cold air. We need to talk. Right now. It was my brother, a man I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. I hadn't seen Mark in 3 years, yet he looked exactly as I remembered. Lean, tense, eyes always scanning the world like everything was a potential threat. He grabbed my arm harder than necessary, pulling me into the narrow space between two buildings. For a moment we just stared at each other, both breathing hard, the cold pressing against us. What the hell are you doing here? I asked. I came because you're in danger. Real danger. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. You don't say. His jaw tightened. This isn't a joke, Adrian. It's not a joke for me. My voice cracked, the exhaustion finally bleeding into it. I'm being set up. My wife, Lena, and Grant. I know. He cut in. The wind died for a moment, and in that stillness something inside me tilted. You know, I echoed. He looked over his shoulder before answering. They contacted me. Who? People above Grant? People above your entire department. They came to me because they thought I could convince you to play along. They know we haven't talked in years, but they figure blood might still have weight. I stepped back, the revelation hitting like ice water. So, what, you're here to help them put the knife in? His expression hardened. I'm here because I said no. A silence settled between us, heavy, unsure. Mark ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how deep this goes. I only know what they told me. Something went sideways on the Harper project. Fraud, contract manipulation, maybe worse. Lena was looped in early. Grant too. They needed someone with clean credentials to anchor the fallout. He looked directly at me. That someone was you. A dull, hollow ache spread through my chest. I'd known it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way nothing else had. I turned away, pressing a hand to the cold brick wall. Everything inside me felt unmoored: anger, betrayal, grief twisting together until I couldn't tell them apart. How long has Lena been in this? I whispered. Mark hesitated. From the beginning. I closed my eyes. So many nights replayed in my mind her late returns, her carefully measured words, the faint distance in her gaze. I had convinced myself marriage goes through phases, that it was normal. But she hadn't been drifting away. She'd been preparing the ground. They want to pin the fraudulent access trail on you, Mark continued. All the doctored signatures, the modified timestamps, the irregular entries, they're building it into a perfect story. Lena gave them everything they needed. Password fragments, behavioral data, usage patterns. Stop, I said, my voice shaking. He did. I leaned against the cold wall, breathing shallowly, like my ribs couldn't expand all the way. She was my wife, I said quietly. I know. I trusted her. I know. And she. My voice broke, but I forced it steady. She used me. Mark didn't speak. He didn't need to. After a long moment, I straightened. Why now? Why did they panic today? Because you weren't supposed to find the security feed. And once you did, the timing collapsed. They needed to bring you in before you started connecting dots they can't afford you to connect. About what? I asked. What else are they hiding? Mark exhaled, breath fogging in the air. There's more money involved than you think, and contracts tied to federal oversight. If this goes public, people high up lose everything, not just jobs, their freedom, and Lena is part of that. She's deeper than you know. His voice softened. I'm sorry. I swallowed hard. Then a question surfaced, a terrible, fragile thing. Did she ever care about me? I asked. Mark hesitated too long. I think she cared about the life you gave her, he said finally. The stability, the access, the cover. I felt something inside me go quiet. Not shattered, just extinguished. What do they want from me? I asked. To cooperate, to sign a few compliance statements, to let the story settle with you as the negligent analyst who mishandled encrypted clients and triggered the breach. And if I don't? Mark looked around again, lowering his voice. Then they destroy you. Completely, financially, legally, publicly. He stepped closer. But there's something else you need to know. I met his eyes, the hairs on the back of my neck rising. They're not just building a case against you, he said. They're building a case that protects Lena, a case where she becomes the whistleblower who tried to save the company from your supposed recklessness. I felt my pulse spike, sharp and painful, because, Mark added, she's already filed an internal incident report, naming you, painting herself as the one who tried to warn HR. It's detailed, convincing. They're using her as the moral anchor of the narrative. A coldness swept through me, absolute, consuming. She wasn't just part of the plan. She was the centerpiece. Mark reached into his coat and handed me something, a small, black USB device. What's this? I asked. The original audit logs, he said. The real ones, unaltered. The ones that prove you weren't anywhere near the Harper adjustments. My breath hitched. How the hell did you get this? You're not the only one who knows how to access things quietly, he said. Dad didn't leave us much, but he did teach us a few skills. For a moment, I almost smiled. Then reality crashed back in. If I have this, I said slowly, I can expose everything. Yes, Mark said. But once you move, there's no going back. We stood in silence, brothers estranged for years, now bound by something neither of us wanted. What are you going to do? He asked. I looked at the USB in my palm. Lena's face flashed in my mind, the calm, the distance, the practiced sincerity. I thought of the messages telling me to come in, to cooperate, to let them bury me alive. I closed my fingers around the device. I'm going to finish this, I said. Mark nodded once. Then you won't be doing it alone. A strange warmth spread through my chest, small but steady, like a faint heartbeat of the person I used to be. We stepped out of the alley together, blending into the flow of the city. But as we crossed the street, I felt eyes on me. I turned just enough to see her. Lena standing near the corner, watching, expression unreadable, hands tucked in her coat pockets, as if she'd been following me for a while. Our eyes locked from across the distance, and in that moment, I knew something with absolute clarity. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting for what I didn't yet understand. But the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over, not by a long shot.